This is Gavin Stone, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
It's a couple of spies talking spy shit. And I had David Fielding on. I don't know if you're aware of Fielding's work, but another cool guy that knows how to go out and rap with people. And we all have our own little approach and a way of kind of identifying what it is that we do, and we all do it just a little bit differently, right? And so thought it'd be fun for us to sort of play with this idea. He talks about having to be entrepreneurial. Now, look, there's a lot of different ways to do that, right? And so let me set this up a little bit. For me, in my world, I had to get up, get out, and get off the camp every day. But I also had to maintain my relationships on the camp, much more important than just going out and doing the very dangerous, lethal, hard job of being off the camp in a dangerous area. And so I had to build a reading list, a following, fans, but also become known in towns. I had to network with people, and I didn't have freedom of movement because it was a dangerous place, but it was absolutely entrepreneurial. And I relied on a lot of people's help, and I didn't have a lot to give back.
Yeah, I can fully kind of relate to that, especially when I remember my mentor saying to me, he said, in this world, somebody's your friend. If they're not your enemy, then they're your friend. Right. So don't be afraid to ask them. Don't be afraid to build a relationship with them. And I remember that, and it kind of stuck with me. And so yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about being entrepreneurial in every way. When you're out there, you've got to connect on different levels with different people all over the place. And depending on what kind of job you're doing, can depend on whether you want it just to be enough to get your way and then be forgotten, or whether you want to actually be remembered for the next time you come in. And, like I said, depending on the objective and what you're trying to achieve can vastly change on how you approach people and what you say you're there for.
Yeah. When you're a client, and let's just put you in the military side, the state-backed side of things, when they give you a mission, a lot of times, in the movies, it's like, oh, we've already been looking into this. Here's the target. The person, a lot of times you just we need you to go there, we think. Oh, and then tell us all the bad things that are happening. And you're like, so you don't know anything. You're like, well, we have some reports. And then you read the reports, you're like, this guy's never been to this country. Like, okay.
Yeah, he's Googled this. I've told the story before, but I'll never forget, my first ever kind of intelligence job, as it were, up until which I was kind of Hollywood educated. I had this vision of how it was all going to go and how it was going to be. And I expected to go into this great big control room where I'd be given a slideshow on this is the bad guy we're looking for, and this is the island he's living on, and yada yada yada, and all this. And then after the slideshow, I'd start getting given gadgets and files and all this information and whatever else. And instead, what I had a meeting, and my assignment was one sentence: find out how the Russians are getting railgun intelligence out of Korea. That was it. And I was waiting for files to be passed and gadgets to be given to me, and in the end, instead, I got, "What the hell are you still doing here? Go!" And that was it. And I remember thinking, "Wow, well, not much to go on there, then." It took me 2 or 3 days to kind of get the information I needed, and
it's so true.
Yeah.
And we still managed to figure it out, right? So let's back out for a second there. So you get that order, find out about railgun stuff, and then here's your ticket to Berlin, and you're like, Berlin? And you're like, yeah, that's the area we want you to do this in. That could be a legitimate thing, and you're like, I guess I have to go to all the Korean barbecues in Berlin,
Yeah, I've had that. Yeah, and of course, sometimes it's like kind of we want you to start from Berlin, or we want you, we don't want anything tracked back, travel plans from this country. Want your ticket to be, flying out from Paris or whatever else. I actually did most of it from my living room, believe it or not. I just reverse engineered it. I just thought, well, if I wanted to get railgun information out of Korea, how would I do it? And I basically thought, okay, well, first thing I'd do is find a railgun expert, and there's surprisingly very few. And then as soon as I found the railgun expert list, as it were, I kind of narrowed it down to the ones operating in Korea or the ones of Korea origin, looked at the kind of stuff they were doing, noticed that one guy had written certain articles with a Russian counterpart that they'd kind of co-produced. And I thought, So the investigations then led me down, and it turned out that this particular Russian fella had ties to the Russian embassy, and it was just, like I said, a lot of it unfolded over a period of 48 hours in my bedroom, and then it was just a case of backing up what I found out online or through investigations, through calling people.
And that's that entrepreneurial part. And maybe I get the same order from my own bounds. Like, you can't take a gun. No, that's against the law. And you're like, oh, okay, so no gun. Can I have cover? No cover. No cover. None of that. You're going to have to just be 100% honest. And you're like, okay. And then you just work through your boundaries and your obstacles, and then probably you and I meet at the Le Hotel International in whatever, Saigon or somewhere. You're like, we're not even in Korea. We're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But completely different approaches, completely different money spends. And they're like, a budget? Oh, no. I mean, travel cards, sure. Don't listen, per diem is $120 a day, and you're like, this is getting harder and harder and harder.
Yeah, that's lunch covered. Yeah, and I fully get that. And you were lucky if you got certain things like cards and that kind of thing. I mean, most of my life it was a case of keep your receipts. And a lot of that had to go down in the expenses claim, and then again, a lot of it you'd invoice, and then 30 days later, if you were really, really lucky, 30 days later, you might get paid.
Where's the report attached to this receipt? Like, I don't need a report attached to every receipt. I just need to get out there and do this. Sometimes I'm just in a cafe existing, and you're efficient. Because legitimately, you are going to cafes, you are going to barbershops, you are going to events, and that costs money, and you're just prospecting, and you have to exist in that space.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, I've had the same kind of thing. Lunch and dinner, and they're kind of, what's this for? It's like, it's for lunch. Well, what were you doing there? I was like, I was eating my lunch. I have to live, and sometimes you just need a few minutes to kind of sit and have your lunch and think about, well, what do I do next, or where do I go from here? And but kind of explaining that sometimes to the higher ups can be a bit of a daunting task in itself.
Yeah, no, especially if they don't know our work and their work is counting beans. And look, God bless, we need the bean counters, right? But when I go out, I have to do certain things. I have to behave certain ways. And, whatever it is, if I'm playing the American, I got to act like an American. And so that means I'm going to tip, even though you don't tip in this country. I'm not going to follow that cultural rule, right? And so all of these things go together. And I remember I had this organization I worked with, and they were like, oh, you guys can't bill that. Oh, you can't bill that. And I'm like, first off, we're not billing anything. We're federal employees. I'm telling you that I'm working. You guys just say yes. And you guys are saying, hey, you're working an awful lot of hours. Yeah, you deployed me to an infantry unit, one of the most prestigious ones in the world. These guys don't do 10-hour days. They do 7 days a week, 12 to 20 hours a day, and 12 gets you called half day. Well, legitimately, they call you half day when you leave. And so when I bill you for when I put on my timesheet that I worked 108 hours this week, I promise you, I worked 108 hours.
Oh, I can believe it.
I work 108 hours.
Yeah, I used to say that my stepson used to say to me, I work 30-something hours a week, and I say, so what do you do after Wednesday?
Right. Yeah. It's hilarious. But that is sort of how it goes, right? And that's the stuff that's not the sexy stuff that you talk about. But there is going to be someone who is going to question your receipts, and they are going to, they're going to hold you accountable to hold yourself accountable. Because obviously, if you're trying to steal money, that's against the law. But if you're not stealing money in our line of work, and you're giving it out to create something, and you are creating things, these things take time.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, the majority of the time, a lot of the work that I got was because of the fact that I got results. So if I sent a receipt and and they said, well, look, what's this for? I'd say, well, it's because I needed it. Right. I'm not buying stuff just for the sake of spending your money. If I'm buying things, I'm buying them because I need them. I mean, you've probably gone through similar things. So the old Hollywood myth is that you get given all these gadgets. In some instances this does happen, but in the majority of the time, the only protection you've got is a Durex, and the only kind of gadgets you've got are your own mobile phone or cell phone, and that's about it. And 9 times out of 10, you want to leave that behind and buy a fresh one before you go. So you'll get into a country and you'll use whatever you've got at your or whatever's available to you in country.
Yeah. Yeah. The good news is all this stuff you're talking about, you don't get anything but directs in your own wits and that kind of thing. That applies pretty much to everybody, because who can afford to give someone, I mean, look, James Bond is great, but if you go waylay a city block, blowing shit up and having a car chase, you don't get to go back to the field ever again.
No, that's it. Your job's over. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had this kind of conversation with people where we've talked in the past, and we've said, look, when people have said how close is it to the movies, and I've gone, it's a million miles away, because if these things are going on, explosions and gunfights and blah blah blah, then you're not very good at your job. You've done it all wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you say, you're never going to go back.
You've burned up. Yeah.
Yeah, probably not only to that country, but probably to most jobs in the field again. And I've said to people, we're trained in escape and evasion. Yeah, we're trained in all these fancy exfil techniques, and we're trained in shooting and improvised explosives, field expedient incendiary devices, all this kind of thing. I said that's all well and good, but that's our last bullet. That's when everything else has gone completely wrong, and now you're fighting for your life just to get home, because you know that when you get home, it's time to retire, because it's gone technical.
Yeah, and this goes for the other team too. So when we see like I'm right now, I'm reading the latest. I don't have it with me now, but I'm reading the latest Jack Ryan Jr. book, because I'm going to have MP Woodward on my show next week. Mm-hmm. And he wrote the book, and it's great. I love reading it. I love the Clancy world and everything. That's why, one of the things that got me interested in counterintelligence in the first place. But the reality is the amount of technology they throw into these things and these people and what they're watching and everything. Okay, sure, some of that maybe happens, but they can't afford to follow me at that level either, right? And I'm just not that important. Now, if you're doing something very important, if you're high level and everything, okay, sure, maybe there's some of that. But to task a satellite, to task some kind of drone assignment, there's only so many drones. And if you've got them flying everywhere, then all of a sudden everybody knows there's drones everywhere and they act differently. And so it's a finite resource, all of the things that we do. And so it is good for us that we have quite a bit of freedom when you do it. And your career is pretty small. You're not doing it for 40 years.
Oh, no, not at all. And I mean, the kind of tech side of it is brilliant, because what they can do now, I mean, is just out of this world, the capabilities they've got tech-wise. If I told most of viewers, it would probably scare them what actually, the government agencies and the private agencies are capable of as well. But and that, for me, it's kind of good in some ways, because if I was working for certain British agencies, for example, we'd have what they'd call a Charlie, and I'd call up, give them the last four numbers of my military number, and I'd say Charlie at them, and that's stuff for casual contact. So it means it's not urgent. There's no major problem. I just need to find something out. So if I can't find it out myself, and I could just say to them, look, I'll call you back in half an hour. I need to know who this car belongs to, or who lives at this house, or something along them lines. And 30 minutes later, I'd call them back, same kind of contact, again, and I'd get the answers, and which was great when you're working for, like I say, certain government agencies and that kind of thing, and you have that at your disposal. When you've got a private client and you don't have that, and it's just somebody who said, right, I want you to find out this information for me, life gets a little bit more tough, and you've got to do it the old-fashioned way. And it's boots on the ground, kind of, digging in to find out whatever information you can get from wherever.
Yeah, let's go down that avenue, because there is a lot of that kind of work, and you can if you're in that world and you build a reputation, it's got to be very siloed, because you don't want too many people to know you're hired for that kind of thing. But when you do get that phone call and they say, we'd like you to go do whatever, you still have to manage their expectation of what you can do. Like when I worked with the Army, it was great, because I would build up reputation. They loved my work, and they would assume that I could just flip on the switch and then start pumping out product right away. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. 2 weeks? No, sorry. I can go there and I will start to write reports at 2 weeks. But this relationship that you're benefiting from right now, that you love, it takes longer than 2 weeks, friend. So I'll be there. And by the way, the unit, so I know you talked with Dave about this. They're like, we want you to go out to where the SEAL team is in this far-flung province, and just do that. And then, how long do you think it'll take you? And I'm like, well, has the SEAL team invited me? And they're like, no, but you just go out there and it'll be all right. And I'm like,
sure.
No, that's not how this works. Those guys need to know I'm coming. They need to know that, like, they have to put me, I'm putting them out. I'm unexpected. And so, yes, it's easy for you to command it, but that doesn't mean that they have to cooperate. Now I've got to work on that. So now the first 2 weeks is them getting to know me. Mm-hmm. So I say all this because when we do come through, it's sort of like Michael Jordan or LeBron James or any of these amazing Olympians. You see them running and it just looks incredible. And you see all the celebration of it. You're like, yeah, but you didn't see them pushing an iron cart back and forth across the track for hours and hours and hours before they're even allowed to work on things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is the thing with, so going with what you were saying there, managing the client's expectations. I got contacted by somebody few months ago, probably even close to a year ago now, and basically there was a real complex story about a American citizen that wanted to find his real parents, and it went right back into the Cold War, and it was one parent was German, the other parent was Russian. They'd given their child away. This adoption agency had then apparently smuggled the child from West Berlin to East Berlin or something like that, and then the adoption agency had then this baby had ended up in an American couple's hands, and and they said, can you go back and can you find our real parents? It was a brother and sister. Can you find our real parents? And we're like, well, yeah, we can probably do it, but that's not going to be easy. It's not going to be cheap, and it's certainly not going to be guaranteed. And they said, well, how much? Well, I told a friend of mine from MI6, and we'd agreed that a fair figure for 2 intelligence officers was going to be around 60 grand, so about 30 grand each. I said, and we'd go out there for a 3-month period, starting in Germany, not knowing where we're going to end up and where we're going to be going from there. And at the end of that 3 months, they were saying, can you guarantee that you will find our parents? I said, no, what I can guarantee you is at the end of 3 months, I will have a more realistic, either I will come to you and say, we've found them, we did it quicker than we thought, or we haven't found them, but it's going to take X amount of days more to do it, or we got no chance of finding them. It's going to be one of those 3 things. I said, and that's all I can promise you for 60 grand. And, and I said, and that's with it as it stands. I said, because if you think hiring a professional is expensive, wait until you hire an amateur. I said, because if somebody goes around there messing everything up for us first and, asking questions and causing problems before we've even started, I said, that makes our job infinitely harder. I said, and I'll tell you from straight away, after that, I don't want the job. If somebody else has already been hired and can't do any good, don't come back to me. You hire me or don't, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's true because, and we don't always get to say that, right? But in the private world, you can, because it really is. If someone, and look, there's a lot of techniques. My judo is different than yours, and if I use a meat cleaver to get something done because I don't care about this relationship at this moment, and it's the vital one, and I just get it wrong, you have to go back and deal with it, and it's a hard thing. So I'll give you an example. When we were in Iraq, I was working with commanders from the same base, right? And they would rotate out. And I happened to be there for several of these commanders. And one of them, we acted like the generals from the general partner. So like the Iraqi general owned that land. Oh, you're the boss. You're the boss, right? And so the Iraqi general's like, well, I'm going to come to your camp and I'm going to come talk to you today, and essentially unannounced, right? Like we would do them. And so he came over and it's in the middle of summer. And they sat him in his Humvee outside the camp and wouldn't give him access to the camp for hours. And he never forgave him. So I knew this, and I housed this information in my head. Me and my interpreter, we would work on it. We would joke with him about it and try to work on deflating this mistake. And the other commander, I would tell the other commanders, like, there's a real problem here. This guy's going to get along great with you, but there's this wall that you are not going to get around, and I've not figured out how to fix it. And they'd be like, don't worry about it. I'm like, I know you're saying that.
It's going to be a problem.
Last commander said that it was always a problem, and there was always reluctance, and there wasn't full buy-in because he didn't forget that he wasn't the boss. And so here's the thing: is I was able to help them deflate the balloon a little bit, but he was never going to forget that. And so we always had to make sure, like, listen, you truly are the boss. If you show up at this camp, and he would test us. He'd show up. and it would be right in just so. And here's just for the audience. I know you know this kind of thing, but when my commander would want to leave his camp, and there'd be fuckery around the gate, because gates have fuckery all around them. There's people doing things. There's gun range wrap. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And when he wants to get out, he'll be patient and he'll be like, hey, whatever, like, Rainbow 6 is going to leave the camp. And all the radio chatter is going on. And then he'd be like, get the fuck out of my way. And you know what happens then? Everybody gets the fuck out of his way.
The seize part.
So if you don't treat the general like that, you have this indelible, irreversible damage, right? And this is what you're talking about, is someone has come in with the meat cleaver chopping everywhere, and whether they meant to or didn't mean to, it's made the path really hard to fix. And you can't even know that going in, so you don't know what is messed up. You just have to counter it. And it's very expensive, very time consuming to have to deal with those kind of broken relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the worst thing in the world, like you say, when somebody's gone in and done all the damage first. And of course, there's other things that, somebody could start poking around, asking questions. It gets people's guard up. Next thing you know, something that they haven't thought about for however many decades, they're thinking, I better actually go and get them files out the attic, and I better burn them, or I better get down into the cellar and get them kind of, that bit of evidence that links me to the whole thing and get rid of it. And so, any kind of leads that you may have potentially come across a few months prior, all of a sudden have disappeared for good, So, it can be a bit of a disaster, as I'm sure probably better than I do.
Yeah. Well, if you ever even get to know, it's I always remind people, like, as skilled as I was, there's a guy named Mullah Omar who's really big deal in the Taliban, and he lived and breathed a mile from all of our main camps in the last place I was in Afghanistan. I never had any idea, not by design. I didn't look for him because. Look, I know we'd love to go get that guy, but they got people focused on him, and so I'm going to focus. I'm going to go to the field of needles and just scoop up needles and bring those to the commander. So he's got shit to do every day. I'm not going to go look for a guy that doesn't want to be found and is trying to be found by the CIA, so.
Exactly. Yeah. That's it. Somebody else is on that job. Leave them to it.
Yeah. And, this is another interesting thing about it, is a lot of what you get is not what anybody knew that they wanted, right? But you find this information out, like, here's this railgun stuff, but let me tell you about this guy Dick that I met and what he is doing. And they're like, holy shit, can you tell us more about that? And so there's always that secondary or even like quintiary thing that you're like, holy, is this important to you? And then they're like, yeah, that's vitally important to us.
Oh yeah.
So we have to write our own requirements. I know that they have around the table, they all think them up and what they need to accomplish a mission. But when you come across something, you've got to have the ability to pivot and have the right questions at the ready at all times.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's one of those things where, and this has happened to me countless times. You get a little thread that you think is going to just, you pull it and you get a little bit of a thread and that's it. And then all of a sudden you're pulling it and you find one thing leads to another, which leads to another, and before you know it, you've unveiled an entirely different kind of group of threads, and then you're going back to your either your broker or whatever, and you're saying, look, what's going on here? We've got all this. Which one do you want? Which way do you want me to go? Like you were saying just about, you're not looking for a guy that doesn't want to be found. Yet sometimes you could go on a lead this way, thinking he's over there, and it all leads back round, and one thing leads to another, and you inadvertently find somebody by accident. And let's face it, as well as I do, there are a lot of intelligence trophies that have come from accidents, where we kind of we stumbled across this and we found that,
Yeah. Well, and if you're in the case of like a rural, hard place like Afghanistan, if you meet 5 people, you've met everyone's cousin. You run out of people, and all of a sudden you are connected to a lot of people.
That's it.
And which is challenging because you're always meeting someone who can talk about you and knows about you. So you're playing a bigger game than you realize, because that sweater is woven really tight.
Exactly, and that's the downside with pretty much the most of any kind of Middle Eastern country. When you're out there, you can't introduce yourself to Bob with one guy and introduce yourself as Bill to another. Whatever cover you've got, that cover is everywhere. And that's the one you've got to stick to. So.
Yeah. One of the things that we do in the States is when we deploy, and we're talking tactical collection, so we can move this around, but I'll just talk about that part of it, is we never go back to the same area. And that's not
Mm,
because of spy stuff, that's just because of budgets and units. And so we don't develop these long-term relationships that expand and grow so that, hey, I was here 2 years ago, my language skills have improved, and then you have this relationship and you build. We don't do that for whatever reason when we go to
mm,
places. And I don't know if that would work for us in our line of work, but I think there is some benefit in developing proficiency in a place, in a language, and comfort to where you can actually plug back into an old network. But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe that's a bad idea.
Well, I mean, so the reason they don't do it, and again, the CIA, MI6, everybody, even every part of military intelligence, they've got this kind of, and it's from experience. You get case officers that start saying, "Yeah, I've got a guy, he's giving me intel, I need cash," because we all know the majority of the time it's cash is the motivation, and that's what we're going to supply. So I need more cash, and you sign it out, and you go along. And what you do is you get comfortable with, and this has happened, like I say, infinite amounts of times. You build this relationship, and you kind of you end up with the case officers and the kind of assets becoming very, very close. And next thing you know, you've got the case officers kind of prompting them what we want to hear, and saying, "Look, I tell you what, I'm gonna say you want a bit more. I'm gonna get some more for you, and instead of giving you $5,000, we're gonna make it $10,000, and we'll have a little bit each. You can give me a couple of grand out of it if I can get you some more." And of course these kind of things happen time and time again. And the more comfortable a case officer and an asset get in that kind of situation, the more times they can kind of milk the system, if you want to call it that. So with the intelligence agencies knowing this, they tend to rotate the case officers and the assets and that kind of thing, and move them out and not send them back to the same place. Look, you've been there. All right, okay, you've got what we need when you were there. Now go over here. So and it makes sense. You can understand it.
No, you can, absolutely. And there's also like that relationship that builds. And look, it's easier to have an affinity for a human than a country or an organization. And so, you become real attached. And that is part of what we do, right? We build a real relationship, and there is the risk of that. And it would be hard to, it would be hard to fix it. So you take the downside of moving people all the time over the downside of having all these people fall in love with each other and all the things that comes with that.
Yeah. And again, this can be even worse if it's kind of like you say, that if it's a female and male case officer and asset,
that kind of love,
can end up going down a very, very different path and become even more dangerous. So there was a joke that a few of the guys I used to know, the intelligence officers I used to work with, and they say, "What's the hardest part of when we do the rotation?" And they say it's informing your girlfriend while you're moving out and the new boyfriend's moving in.
Yeah. I mean, there's real truth to that, right? And also having to terminate sources, whatever kind of terminate that's going to be. It's even if the source is, and you've heard me say this, who's running who, right? And at some point you can't decide, or you find out like, hey, it's going bad the other direction, and you got to terminate. And so that often leads to that person's demise in a dangerous place, because now you're going to have to expose them as being an asset. Well, you don't have to, but you often expose them to being an asset, and that's not good for them to stay alive. And so that also is damaging to you.
Yeah, and of course there is. So obviously, for anybody who doesn't know about this, you've got what they call single source intelligence, which is if you've only got one asset giving you intelligence from something, and you can only take their word for it. Then if nobody else is kind of collaborating what's been said, then basically it's like a your words against theirs kind of scenario. And the intelligence itself, useful but not actionable intelligence. So it's really, really difficult. So if you've got 10 lots of sources and they're all telling you the same thing, then there's a higher chance that that's true. But if you've just got one guy and there's nobody else telling you, and he says this is definite, then you think, well, hang on, is he just trying to get money out of me? And if this happens time and time again, and then the next thing you know, they say, look, you're going to have to drop him. Then you have to go and terminate the asset and say, look, sorry, no longer we're not in business. And then there's nothing worse than 6 months later, you find out that he was telling the truth. You couldn't get the information from anywhere else. You find out why, and they say, "But go back and rekindle things." And you're, it's got to be a hard job now.
Yeah. And you find out that guy got nailed to a wall and shot 100 times. You're like,
yeah. Oh, yeah. His wife probably won't want to talk to me.
Yeah. It's crazy. What, I always talk about also the challenges internally, like of dealing with things, because there is this, people that get to do things outside the wire require a lot of freedom. That freedom makes the machine nervous, right? And so, when you go out and you're delivering, they want to know, how are you delivering? Who are you talking to? Why are you spending this money? And they start to question if you're actually doing it or not. Are you making it up? And there's a lot of mistrust for this person that's doing this extremely hard thing. And you need top cover, but you also need to do your job. And also, by the way, when you do this kind of work, you cross the line fairly routinely for some, right? Because there's a lot of lines. And totally good. And someone else is like, no, you're not good. And you're like, but I was the one there doing it. And I listened to what you said. And the line was here. And they're like, the line is over here. And you're like, no.
Not when you're in the field. It really is. And of course, like, I mean, you say that about like kind of, being questioned. And I've had it. I hate the report writing side of things. I really do. It's the worst part for me. And this is the bit that's always missing from The Bourne and The Bonds and the other movies is the hours at the desk typing and then going, what was it you said about that? What was this? And of course, you know as well as I do, usually if depending on the scenario, if you've gone to meet a source at, say, a hotel, as soon as they've left, while it's still fresh in your head, you've got to be either physically writing or typing a report so that there's no memory pollution and blah, blah, blah. And that's the bit I hate, because you're trying to get it all out and down as quick as possible. And you think, I'll go back and neaten it up later. And of course, somebody then reads it and they go, well, you say this here, and you said it was like kind of 1759, and then here you say it was 1859. So probably a typo. And then next thing you know, are you telling the truth? And you're, oh, for crying out loud, this is the last thing I need to worry about over a typo. I don't need to be interrogated. But you're right. There's a lot of mistrust. And like I say, I was lucky because I got results. And I had that in my pocket, but there's only so many times, because as you said, when you're on about the line, there's only so many times you can say yes, but I get results. And you go, but you cross the line, but I get results. You can only, there's only so many times you can use that line before they say, look, we don't care whether you get results or not. You're going a bit too far, or you've done this wrong, or you've broke protocol, or you were meant to do this. And so again, it can become very difficult, as you know.
How long does it take to be repeatedly and reliably good in the field, where you could say, let's say that you and I open an intelligence company and we're going to train people. We're just going to have our own little private farm and we're just going to train people. How long is it going to take us to make someone competent in the field where we're like, this is a better agent than what you're going to produce with your basic course, whatever your basic course is?
I think that a lot of that depends on the person. I mean, it's kind of, there are some people in the world, some of them that I know personally. There's one particular guy I used to work with years ago, a guy called Dave, and he was that unlucky. I actually joked. I said to him once, I said, Dave, you are so unlucky that if you died and got reincarnated, you'd come back as yourself. And and nobody wanted to work with him because it was just he was a walking, talking disaster. Bless him. And then there are other guys who are just naturals at it, and they've got the right mindset, they've got the right frame of mind, and they are, how can I put it there? I mean, you can say terms like go the extra mile and whatever else, but these days, going the extra mile is working 5 minutes past closing time. I mean, actually, kind of, somebody who says, no, I'm not stopping until I achieve this, and getting that kind of person with that kind of determination, and somebody who's teachable, somebody who's coachable, somebody who's willing, it is really, really difficult to find that right mindset within a person. But that, in my opinion, makes a massive difference. You can have somebody, you can spend a year training them and they'd be no good after another 10 years. There's other people you could spend 6 months training them and they'd be perfect at it.
And David and I were talking about this too, and this remains true. There are people that are built for the field people that aren't, and people that have this much field life and people that have this much field life, and my hands are off the screen because they continue to go, right? And so there's some folks that are fantastic, and what you want them to do is work on the operational side or the analysis side or manage these things because they're brilliant at that, but they're not going to be, which I think is probably the hardest, is that field person that has the comfort to go into these very uncomfortable black and white gray situations and come out reliably with production. Like, hey, I don't care what he does. That guy can produce. You can't. So you go figure out how to help him produce. Like, that should be the answer. But, you know, not everybody wants that. They don't want to hear that someone out there is doing something great. They want to be that great person. But it's not comfortable to do what we do. It's dangerous. It's hard.
No, definitely not.
Full of mistakes, you know?
Yeah, and of course, I mean, if you're working for, like, you know, the military or a government agency and that kind of thing, you know roughly what your boundaries are and what you're capable of offering. You know, and there's nothing worse. I mean, from my point of view, when I did a lot of the contracting work and that kind of thing, you know, contractors are just they're very much looked down upon and they're very disposable. So you go out there, you nurture a relationship with an asset, you get masses of gold when it comes to intelligence, you hand it over and you've promised this guy, look, at the end of it, it's all, you're going to get a passport, you're going to get relocated, you know, and blah, blah, blah. And then it comes to the end of the term and it comes to delivering on the promise and you go, right, sort this passport out. And they go, yeah, we've changed our mind. You know, he's just going to have, you know, 10 grand. Or whatever, and you no, I promised him a passport and citizenship. No, we're not doing that anymore. You know, and then you're like, oh, now what? You know, so it can be, you know, and then like you say, you know this, you've been through this. If you get an asset then that ends up getting killed or in a like I say, either imprisoned or killed, and then you've got to live with that. Because you caused that, you know, it was you that made that happen. So that's why a lot of intelligence officers end up drinking or kind of, you know, and I think there's a pretty high suicide rate amongst intelligence officers as well.
Sure, has to be. Yeah, because you're right. Like you guys turned me into a liar, and that person now is corrupted, is dangerous, maybe dead. And I am the one, that person visits me at night, doesn't visit you. It's just a decision to you, right?
Exactly.
And it is hard. And it makes you want to die. And it makes you want to drink and take pills and make all kinds of bad decisions because you deserve punishment. And that's what we do.
Yeah. And I was talking about it not so long back, and, you know, and it's kind of, they were saying, why do you think intelligence officers drink so much? And I said, it's quite simple. When you're out and you're busy and you're doing all the things in the daytime and you're surrounded by all the noise, I said, that's fine. I said, but when you come home at night time and the noise stops, things replay because there's only you and your imagination. I said, and to get rid of that, you have to douse it. Usually with alcohol.
Yeah. I mean, there's a real thing in that, and you always have to. I always have to deal with it. I always deal with all the tales of woe, and you know, because you meet people at their worst. At least for what I did, I met people and you talk to them and they're at the worst moments of their lives. They've had so much pain and agony, and I'm trying to fight for my side. And this person is just desperate to tell me their story of how this horrible thing has happened to their family, you know? And they want me to be a savior, and I don't have anything to save them with. I have an ear, but that ear is going right to my heart. Yeah. And, you know, it lasts. It doesn't go away.
That's it. I've taken this down a very dark route. Sorry, buddy, I didn't mean to go down that route. It's only 8:45 here in the UK, so I apologise. So let's keep it a little bit light-hearted and go back down the road of tech or something.
Well, okay. So if you could put together a simple package for you, like I'm going to hire you to go out, and I need you to get, you know, basic. I don't know. I need a breakdown on a certain area, its leaders, and the businesses they're in. What do you need me to send you with? How much time do you need to go and establish a network that you could plug back into? Because you don't need to be there all the time. I just need you to go there and build something out. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm doing it all myself, then it's going to be a bit different to when you're working for. If you've had the privilege of some of the agencies who've been able to send a surveillance team out first and work on, you know, your potential targets, their patterns of life, or the POL, and the other bits and pieces to, you know, to arrange.
You're the initial recce. We're going to make our decision on all that stuff to decide from there.
Yeah. So if I'm everything, then the first thing I'm going to do probably 24 hours of research on the location. You know, everything that I'm going to need to know: local laws, local customs, blah, blah, blah. Anything I can find out online. Get my ticket out there, assuming I don't need any kind of visa or anything. Get my ticket out there, and then it's going to be boots on the ground. I'm going to be an alias, having a look around, and kind of just keeping very, very, very low key. And as soon as I've decided that I've picked probably half a dozen targets, I'm going to narrow it down to the two primary targets that look the most promising. Surveillance is going to be 2-3 weeks, maybe 4, just to establish pattern of life. And then gradually after that, I'm going to work on how I'm going to do the bump. So after about a month, we're looking at doing the bump, nurturing a relationship over a period of a month or 2, depending on how I go about the bump. Whether it's a smile campaign that builds up to an actual introduction, or whether it's just an off chance kind of take a chance, tap him on the shoulder kind of job. So yeah, probably another couple of 2-3 months, and then by probably no more than 5 or 6 months, I should have built up a reasonable sized network. Not massive, not huge, not infinite.
Yeah.
But a reasonable network enough to say, and again, like I say, this is all in an ideal world, in kind of a make-believe land, right. And so, it's not always that simple, and as well as I do, this can vary depending on where you're operating.
Right.
If you're doing this in Paris, it's going to be completely different to if you're doing it in, say, North Korea.
Right. Well, and you said surveillance, right? And so I'm thinking, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about discreet? Are you going to be open with it? Like there's all kinds of levels of those things, and I mean, it's a lot. And when you also say that, like, how much are you working each day? Because if I'm your case manager, right? If I'm trying to manage what you're going to do, I'm like, hey, man, listen, I don't want you working more than 12 hours a day. And I don't want you working 7 days a week. I just don't. I need you to be you, and you're going to push back and tell me what you need to do each out, and we're going to find a happy medium, but we'll work ourselves to death because there's always more to do than we have time to do.
Oh, definitely, and of course, this is one of those things where, like a racehorse that can be flogged, it'll run till it dies, and we're very much the same. But, if it gets to the point where it's like, kind of, look, this is an order, you've got to work no more than 10, 12 hours a day or whatever, then I'm going to say, well, look, if that's what you want, then I'm going to need a small team. I'm going to need to hire a couple of contractors who I'm going to be able to work on stag, and, and we're going to be able to switch things around. I mean, again, you've done this. You know how surveillance work. If you're a one-man surveillance team, it's not an easy task. It's going to be a problem. So you're gonna need more guys. And again, the more guys you have, the more budget goes up, the more accommodation, and the more you and so you have to say, well, how big is the job, and how much do you want the information? What kind of a budget have I got to work on? And so it's great to get these things in place before you go. But like you say, sometimes it's not until you get on the ground that you go, well, I'm going to need more than I thought, or things change. You got to be very dynamic in this job.
Yeah, no, it is a very complex thing. And then what they think up in the boardroom on what they need and what it takes to get there. None of those people are field people. None of them. They don't ever go, oh, well, let's get a field person in here into this working group and figure out what, we're gonna probably hire Gavin. Let's get Pete in there so we can understand what the field time looks like. They don't ever do that. No, like, yeah, we figure this will take, I don't know, I'm probably easy, like 6 hours a day. You probably do it for about 10 days and come back with a stack of papers this big and have it all figured out, right? And
of course. Yeah. And of course, sometimes you and again, you've probably done this as well. You will put mountains of gold in your reports, right? Real kind of actionable intelligence stuff that is just some real fantastic stuff. And then they'll turn around and they'll say, "Oh, well, what color was the car he was driving?" You go, what difference does that make? Oh, well, we need to know. You didn't put it in your report. Like, I don't really care. I don't remember, and I don't give a shit, to be honest with you. What is important is that this guy is meeting with this guy, and this guy is in bed with him, or whatever else. And I mean, obviously they're not bothered about the color of the car, but it'd be something as trivial as that, and you just think, leave me alone.
Or you would say, I saw these two guys from this professional group, and I actually made a relationship with Larry, who is like this leader of this petro company, and he does petro things, and you guys were kind of talking about that, so that's pretty cool. And they're like, yeah, what color was Rick's car, right? And you're like, yeah, you guys have a baseball card for everybody's like a simple bio card. You have a baseball card for Larry, and whatever name I used, and you have a shadowy figure. I just met this guy, and I'm going to go out to coffee with him, and you're asking me the fucking color of that guy's car?
Yeah,
come on, man.
Yeah,
focus your attention here. We just ID'd someone that you don't even know anything about. So yeah, it's these are the things. Or they take they take a clip of what you've written out of context, insert it into a bigger report with a bunch of reports, and you're like, that's not how I wrote that. It's word for word, yes, but you've completely changed.
Yeah, taking it out of context.
Yeah.
It's because I mean I was actually talking to somebody not so long back about like going the transition of going from intelligence officer to author is a really difficult one, because you've written intelligence reports and we have to do this thing called bluff, or bottom line up front. We have to get all the most important information at the top, and then the details, the less, so it goes from the most important, the second most important, third most important, the details of why it's important, and then the details. And by the time you got to the bottom of the page, it doesn't even get read. The one line, what the hell's going on? So of course that's how we get used to writing when we're doing our intelligence reports.
Yeah.
Now, when I started writing a book, I remember like kind of writing my first draft. The first time I ever decided to do a novel, and I sent it. It was actually my mother-in-law, because she's actually an editor, and she had a look at it. She said, she said, that's not a book; it's a report. I told you what happens in the story. People they don't want to know what happens in the story. Well, what do you mean? They want emotions, and they want descriptions, and they want a build-up, and they want character, and they want da-da-da. And I'm like, oh, that's going to take some working on.
No, that's true. And I mess around with writing. I've got a number of projects that I'm working on in general professionally, but it is hard to try to write with emotion and spend time. I'll put myself in the environment, and I'll think about like what I would do and what I would look for. And, nobody cares that I've clocked how many people are in the room, or I've looked for 2 exit points, or like maybe I put that in the story, but I don't even think about that now. Like it's sort of just an automatic thing that my brain just does, and I just know it without having to even worry about it. And so how do you communicate that? And how do you communicate that? Like, I don't worry about which way my back is facing the room, because I'm like, that's such a, but that's great for people that want to do that. I don't worry about that, because I want to afford that to my guests. Whoever I'm going to talk to, I'm going to let them have whatever seat they want, because I want them to be comfortable. It's my job to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so try to relate that as well, because that comes with experience. I'm trying to jam a lot of experience into that setting that I can't caveat, italicize paragraph, to make it so that you understand why I make these decisions, and that's one of the things I struggle with, is how do I explain why this character does this thing, And so it's really difficult to do those things.
So I kind of cheated with my book, and I'll tell you for why. I was fed up of whether it's a cop book, a detective book, a spy book, or whatever. A lot of authors will go down the route, and I've seen it now that many times. It's built into films and everything else. They'll get the experienced detective or spy or whatever, and then they'll have a rookie or a civilian who'll be asking all the questions, and then it gives the author the chance to explain why it's done a particular way. And to me, it was kind of lazy. It's again and again and again it's been done. This year I'm doing this way because of and I just thought it's been done that many times. So what I did in my book, I'll see if I can find a section to see if I can show anybody that's kind of able to see the screen. I don't know if you can see that there, but in as you go down the story, there's a section there, and it says tradecraft here somewhere. I don't know if you can see it. And what will happen is it'll pull away from the story for a second. It'll say tradecraft, and it'll explain exactly why it's done that way, why it's not done another way, how and whatever else, and blah blah blah. It's all italicized, and then it goes back to the story. And I did it that way, so you can read the book 3 ways. If you've got no clue and you're not a spy-fi reader, you can read and find out all the tradecraft as you go. If you're an experienced, seasoned spy fiction reader or a former intelligence officer or whatever else, you can just read that. You can skip the tradecraft sections because you know why it's done and go straight back to the story. Or or if you're just curious and you want to read it as a field manual, you can just read the tradecraft sections. So that's what I kind of did in the book. And of course, all the traditional publishers and the kind of old school writers are like, you can't do that. That's not how we do it. And I'm like, I did. And the readers so far, they love it, and I'm getting a lot of great feedback from people saying, you know what, this is refreshing, and I like it, and I've learned so much reading your books. So I kind of broke the rules a little bit, but that's nothing new for what we do, eh?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and there's a lot of things. I'm always on about how we don't have a badge, we don't have a hat, we don't. We have schools, but hardly anyone even gets to go to those schools, and so and even if I said a spy school, there's 10 other ones no one's ever heard of. I mean, most people have ever heard of a strategic debriefer course, and if there's a nondescript course, there it is. What is it? There's not a window in that building, by the way, and hasn't been a window in that building since as long as I've known about that building, and so you don't know anybody that's graduated from it. And if you do, they don't talk about what they do. And so you just know nothing about this course. And so and I'm not revealing any big secret, but go look it up online and you'll be like, I don't know what that is. Right. We have all these things like this that are, look, we have to tell our stories more, because what we do is impressive. And I'm not in the world of doing it anymore. It might sound like I'm doing it all the time, but no, I did it a lot, and I'm good with where I'm at. And I'm glad to tell stories about it. I'm glad to talk about it. I'm glad to help the next generation understand like what it takes to get there. But we've got to do a better job of telling. And I appreciate you put the tradecraft in there, because a lot of tradecraft, this stuff's just known. It's in movies all the time. I want to say this, and I'll let you go. A friend of mine got upset with me because I talked about a Mad Minute, and I'm like, Mad Minutes aren't classified, and even the stuff in the Mad Minute isn't classified once you've done the Mad Minute.
No, I mean, I was just going to say about the whole the amount of stuff that the movies get wrong.
That too. Yeah.
It's just. I mean, so you'll see somebody, and it'll be like 3-month-old CCTV footage that they'll zoom in and enhance instantly, and you're like, no, it's CCTV footage. Once it's been taken and it goes to the storage box, you got all these cameras that then feed it to the central computer that then go into the memory. If this was high resolution, you'd fill up that memory in no time. You wouldn't be able to have more than like a couple of hours of footage. So. To do that is almost an impossibility. Then you got the other one. What's that other one I used to laugh at? Oh yeah, keep him talking. We're tracing the call. It's like it's instant. Before the phone has even rang, you know where the call is coming from. Even caller ID these days, civilians know who's calling before they answer the phone, and it's a similar kind of system. There's so much that they get wrong, and and I laugh at it and I love it, but they do occasionally get a few things right, which is good. Not all the time, but
yeah, you're right. They do get a lot of things wrong, and look, some of it's to serve the story and everything, and all that. Do you have a favorite spy character?
Oh, now you got me. This might sound a little bit crazy, but have you ever seen the series The Blacklist?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Now, in our house for a while. I absolutely love that. I've still got some of the last season to watch, but the guy Raymond Reddington, he was originally meant to be a naval intelligence officer, wasn't he? So technically, kind of, even though he's a criminal, technically he was kind of a spy. So I suppose if I was going to go with any, it would probably be that.
I like it. Yeah.
Not your traditional spy, but yeah.
That's all right. Same kind of. It's like a lot of characters are Sherlock Holmes, just in a different jacket. I got what you're saying. And then I don't want to dive too much into this. We only have so much time left. But current events. People are kind of shocked that Mossad might have killed some people, and it's like, man, you guys don't know how Mossad operates. I mean, do you have any thoughts on anything? And then to think that they know what happened too, because. And they go for a quote from Netanyahu. He's like, "You think I'm going to talk about that shit?" No.
Oh, I know. Yeah, bless him. So, I mean, one thing I've had the privilege of kind of knowing them, and in the past working with a couple of Mossad guys. the main thing that differs from the Mossad to any other traditional Western intelligence agency that I'm aware is the sheer amount of compartmentalization. There could literally be 4 guys working on the same job, and they don't even know they're working on the same job. You won't necessarily know who you're working with or whatever else. You know, they might turn around and say, at this particular time, when that man leaves, you're going to radio through to somebody else. You don't know who he is, and you're just going to say, you know, the target has left the building, and that's it. Right. And so for that level of compartmentalization, you know, between themselves, it's obviously like a pyramid, and you know, one man at the top maybe knows some of what's going on at the levels below, but certainly doesn't know what's going on right on the ground. And the guys on the ground, they know some of the levels of what they're doing, but not what's going on further up the pyramid. So that's what I'll tell you about the Mossad, and they've all. Whereas like your typical CIA station chief would hire guys like me and say, you know, look, we need a clean skin, somebody deniable, somebody, you know, that we can just send in to do a job that's got no ties to us, you know, and I'd get hired for that. The Mossad, they would do similar things, but not in the same way. They would use and utilize and leverage other people. And the other people above them won't know what's happening. It sounds really nebulous here, and I'm honestly not trying to be as vague as everyone else. I don't want to get shot. But yeah, no, they are good at what they do. They're very good at what they do.
Sure.
You know, they're very, you know, but at the same time, they can be exceptionally ruthless when it's required.
Well, and that ruthlessness is born out of the fact that they're not allowed to lose. You know, and they fight at a different level because of the enemies arrayed around them. And this is not for or against Israel, but that's how they look at it. And when people break into the Olympics and steal their citizens, they're like, this is how we're going to do this. And ruthlessness is part of it. And so, and what Gavin hasn't said out loud, but I'll say it out loud, they'll go be this ruthless. So like, hey, buy an obituary for Gavin Stone and say that Gavin Stone got blown up by a phone bomb. And then they'll go kill Gavin Stone after he's read his own obituary with a fucking phone bomb.
Yeah.
Because they want people to understand, we will get you. We will go to another country, break their sovereign laws, steal your citizen, and murder that person.
And of course they will do that because of the fact that in their eyes, very much like Russia in some ways, everybody's the enemy.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, yeah. It's this tiny spit of land surrounded by all these massive countries that all hate them, you know. And I mean, we have got some good allies and ties between, like, I mean, you know, Americans supply a lot of technology to Israel and vice versa. So do the Brits and vice versa. But at the same time, you know, it's a mutual agreement more than it is a friendship. You know, it's kind of, look, we'll swap you this for that, but we're still not best friends. And I don't think the Israelis are kind of really best friends with anybody. They're either enemies with you or they are neutral. You know.
Well, and you'll notice that when we talk in the news and in foreign policy circles about the ceasefire between between Israel and Hamas, we're not saying a peace accord. We're saying a ceasefire. We're not saying unconditional surrender. We're saying
that's it.
Ceasefire.
Yeah, you haven't got to go and start hugging people.
That's it. And Israel gets to go, no thanks. And by the way, Hamas gets to say no thanks. That's what they've said so far. You know?
And of course, there's a lot of confusion. You know, I mean, last time I was in Israel was what year were we in? 2024, 2023. Probably about 2-3 years ago, thereabouts, give or take. And there's lots of confusion over the geography of Israel, and there's a lot of, especially here in England, you know, they say, well, why doesn't Israel and Gaza, why don't they leave each other alone, kind of thing? And it's kind of the best way to explain it is it's almost like they're all living in the same house. You know, it's not like there's your country and there's our country, and let's put a wall and you stay there and we'll stay here. You know, it's kind of, they're arguing over who's in the bathroom the longest. Why hasn't somebody cleaned the kitchen? They're all occupying. You know, yes, there is an area that's primarily Israel, and yes, there is an area that's primarily like the Palestinian area. You know, but they overlap, and yeah, it's got. I mean, you've probably been there, so you probably know. But it's a complex situation. A war been going on for thousands and thousands of years, and all of a sudden, some Gen Z's they're an expert on it.
It's laughable. Yeah. And it is a thing that there is going to be more brutality. And just because you have a ceasefire, there's not going to be the first or last ceasefire. Like, unless you deal with some kind of reckoning, to include the erasure of, there isn't a state of Palestine anyhow, not in the UN. Look, I know there's some kind of like hedge, right? But there is no Palestine, not to the U.S., not to England. I think Russia, identified, but most of the world says there is no state there, partly because they refuse to have one. And so that's how complex this is how do we make them viable?
That's it. And that's the hardest part, because what they're, and you can kind of understand the argument, and I wasn't going to go down this way just yet, because it's so complex. But if you can picture the fact that the minute they turn around and say, okay, we'll put a border, and this is Palestine, and this is our bit of land, and now we want to be a recognized state, all of a sudden, they've now got no claim over anything beyond that border. It's almost like admitting, okay, this is our bit, that's their bit. And they don't want to do that. They want to say, this is all of our bit. And this, and so to be recognized as a state, they would have to have that border. And to have that border would be an admission of that's theirs. And that's where the complexities lie. And again, I've kind of simplified a very, very complex, kind of conflict, and like I said, this is not a new war.
Right. We haven't talked about Houthis or Iran or Hezbollah and all the other things that go into this, by the fighting internal U.S. political fighting towards what we want Israel to do and everything else. So this is all kinds of it's crazy that we have a Shia nation compelling Sunnis to proxy for them. Oh my God, like it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier. So, but getting all the way back to the germ of this thing, when we look at Mossad, it is an excellent world-class intel organization, and they do keep the gloves off, because that's how it goes. And when you force them to, they get nasty. They really do. And they turn their intel into dead people a lot, and they're going to keep doing that. It's not a surprise that they're killing people that are funding them. It won't surprise me at all, and I've said this since the beginning, that if they went into one of the Emirate states and they smoked someone in a hotel at UAE or Qatar, and they're like, oh yeah, this guy was one of the guys. He's got his hands on the money. Boom, kaboom, and it'll happen. It'll happen. And
I won't take away the kind of, they are ingenious with a lot of what they do, especially, you see the tech and the gadgets that we've got, but they've got some bloody good stuff, and not only that, some of the stuff, some of our stuff and our better stuff is either devised from or comes from Israel as well, so it was. And this goes down to tech, down to gadgets, even as simple as things as the Israeli field dressing. That's in a lot of the individual first aid kits now that you get in the military. And of course, I don't know, they're probably using them in civilian world as well. But that's something now that's standard across most Western militaries, and so you've got to give these guys their due. They do a good job of a lot of things, with a lot of things. If you want, the most reliable kind of kit, 9 times out of 10, it's gonna either be from Israel or have some origin in Israel.
Yeah, well, and the funny thing is we're not supposed to call it an Israeli bandage, because that's supposed to be derogatory, I guess, and I think they're pretty proud of it.
I know.
So I think we call it the self-compressing bandage or something.
Something
I'm like, no thanks, I'll call it the Israeli bandage. Good on those guys for inventing it.
Oh, I know, yeah, and of course, you got these kind of politically correct stuff. We can't call it Israeli this, we can't call it Israeli that. And of course, in the nicest possible way, that's what it is, and politically correct, all well and good in Washington D.C., but what, we work in the field. We'll say it as it is.
Yeah. Well, at a minimum, thanks for coming on the show, and I appreciate that. Below is the link to at least one of your books, and that's the one called "How to Tell If Someone's Lying." And that's just that was kind of the entryway for you, but you're doing a lot more than that now. Is there anything else that you want to plug while we're sitting here? Everybody, look, Gavin knows a lot. He's got 100% my backing. He's legit. So support him in however you can. But what else do you want to plug?
Thank you. Well, I'd certainly love to plug my YouTube channel if that's all right with you.
Sure.
I get a lot of guys on there, different friends and different colleagues and people I've met, and they're all from different three-letter agencies. I've had FBI spy recruiters on. I've had KGB guys on. I've had the guy who wrote the CIA's current mind control program on there. I mean, I've had a good old mix of guys, GCHQ, MI6, and we come on and we talk very much like me and you have about our stories from the field, things we've done, the way it really is and that kind of thing. And I'm trying to build that up a little bit. So, yeah, if you want to know more about what happens in the world of spies, please come over and check that out. It's just type Gavin Stone author into YouTube and you'll find me.
I wrote YouTube, but you guys know what to do with that. Right there. Gavin Stone Gavin Stone author, not on YouTube. Well, maybe on YouTube. YouTube. That's how I get for going fast. You guys know how to look on YouTube. You guys know how to do that. You guys know to subscribe and all those things. And but yeah, it's the stuff is great. And actually, I was going to bug you for a couple of people that you've had on the show. And
yeah, sure, yeah, no problem at all.
I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate you hanging out with me. Let me roll these credits and come right back and say bye. Hey, everybody else, thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by your